Ever since I was a fresh-faced gamer rolling my first D20, the first time I laid my eyes on a rollable random table, I knew that I was in love. The sheer random nature of these tables also became immediately divisive, as even people at my table expressed disdain for the thing that I thought was so much fun. Random tables have brought me some of the most fun, wacky, and original characters, villains, and adventures that I never would have come up with myself. And today we're going to talk about it. We're going to break down the pros and cons of random rollable tables and the ways that I think you should be using them in your game, regardless of how you feel about them right now. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video for the Geek Pantheon. I am Eric, and like I said, today we're going to talk about random rollable tables. Now, what I'm talking about specifically when I say random rollable tables, I know a lot of people initially go to random encounters, where you have this wilderness like hex, and you move X number of hexes, you roll to see what encounter happens. And that's not exactly what we're going to be talking about today. I think a lot of the things that I'm going to be saying are applicable to random encounter tables, but I'm talking more about the things that you find in the player's handbook and the dungeon master's guide, where for your flaw or your ideal or your bond when you're creating a character in your background, you can roll for those as opposed to just picking them. Or a source that was used heavily in the writing of the script for this video, Chapter 3, Creating Adventure in the Dungeon Master's Guide, has some great rollable tables in my opinion. But first, let's talk about why some people like them and why some people hate them. And I think it all comes down to what we call them: random. They introduce some chaos that is baked into the game of D&D, into your planning. Whether you're a player or a DM, you are doing a thing away from the table, outside of the context of the game, but you're introducing the random nature of the game into that element. And sometimes you can get results that you don't want, results that seem weird, disjointed, and force you to do something that you normally wouldn't do. And for the people that love random tables, all the reasons that I just listed why people don't like them are exactly why people like them. They cause chaos. They force you to do things that you would never think to do. And I understand both sides. And I know people that use rollable tables in the various ways that I'm about to describe, the different ways that you can use them. And I think that if you just dismiss random rollable tables right now, you're reading through an adventure or a source book and you see a random rollable table, you just skip right past it because no, I'm not going to roll on something. I'm not going to let chance determine how I build my character or plan my adventure. Hopefully you will watch the end of this video, because I do think that there is some good to come out of a random rollable table, even if you never pick up a die. So first off, the most obvious and my favorite way to use a random rollable table: rolling a die. So just for an example, I got chapter 3 of the DMG pulled up on D&D Beyond. I went to the creating adventure section and I got to rolling. And I rolled out to see what kind of adventure the dice would lead me to. So first off, I rolled for the adventure's goal. What is the driving force behind this? And it came up that the party is trying to foil a villain's evil scheme. Pretty straightforward, nothing too wacky and crazy about that. And then secondly, who is the villain of this story? And it is a schemer who seeks to rule. The party's ally is an enthusiastic commoner, and the adventurer's patron is an old friend. And the inciting action, what starts them off on the adventure, is one night the entire party dreams of going to the adventure location. And finally, the climax is the party arrives at the location of the villain's evil schemes, arriving just before the plans are finalized and realized for the villain. So we have that as our tapestry and what we're going to build our adventure off of. Once again, it's nothing too wild. It's nothing too crazy. So literally, as I was writing this script, without thinking or spending too much time planning it, just kind of writing based on these bullet points that I got, I created an adventure. One or more of the PCs have an old mage friend from their hometown who uses a variant of the dream spell sent out to the party, to where they dream of an unknown commoner in their hometown. They see themselves approaching this person. So presumably following their dream, they arrive in town and find it in neglect and disrepair. The town has seen far better days. So they track down this mysterious person from their dream and find out that they are leading a resistance against the mayor's son. Up until recently, the mayor was providing for the people, but it's been about a month now, and the mayor hasn't been seen. And his son is not as generous as his father. The party investigates and eventually discovers an underground ancient labyrinth beneath the city, and through some form of investigation, discover that the mayor's son was recently seen going down into it through a secret door. And as they give chase, they see that the son is about to sacrifice his father to a devil with the promise of growing power for the rest of his life. The party arrives and is able to stop the ritual, saving the mayor and leaving his son to whatever fate the mayor decides. That's an adventure. I rolled some dice, had that blueprint laid out for me, and I think it would be pretty fun, that adventure that I came up with. Obviously, I only have the bones at this point. I have a lot of work to do before I have a fully realized adventure, but that's the point. It's not supposed to write everything for you. It's supposed to give you a launching pad to where then your creativity and your skill can take over and further flesh it out. And before we move on, if you're finding this video at all helpful, please like the video, give it a thumbs up down below, and subscribe to the channel. We're going to have plenty more of these videos coming out in the near future, and you don't want to miss one. Also, if you want to talk about D&D with me in real time, or anything else for that matter, I do stream on Twitch every Sunday and Tuesday at 8 p.m. Central. Link down in the description below. Come over, hang out, have a good time. We would love to have you. Okay, another way that I've seen a lot of people use these random tables is kind of a hybrid of the first method and the third method that I'm about to talk about. And that is to use the tables by rolling on them, but allow yourself to re-roll if you roll something that's just way too out there. And the most recent example I have of this is a D100 table was recently brought to my attention through the Eberron subreddit, where they had a D100 table of pretty much every faction in Eberron. And somebody described the way they were using this table is rolling a D100 4 times, and the first one that you roll is the Act 1 enemy, the second roll is the power behind the Act 1 enemy, the third roll is the ally of the party, and the fourth roll is a wild card. And so I rolled just for fun to see what kind of campaign I would come up with. And the first roll was the Umbergen Drow. Okay, so we're starting off in Zendrick. And the second roll was Breland. Now, those of you who are fans of Eberron know that that's a very peculiar pairing, to have Breland be the power behind the Umbergen Drow. So a lot of DMs in that situation would reroll. This doesn't work. This doesn't fit with the setting. So I'm going to reroll. I didn't. I came up with the solution. I'll drop my solution to it in the comments down below. Go check it out. I'm pretty happy with it. But anyway, that is a way that you can use these tables. Nobody is telling you if you decide to roll, you must stick with every single roll. Maybe there's 3 or 4 options on a D8 table that you would be happy with. You roll, you don't get one of them, roll again until you get the one of the ones that you wanted. Or just roll a D4 if there's 4 options on that table, and 1, 2, 3, 4. But you can augment these things, and I think that's a really nice middle ground for a lot of dungeon masters who want to inject a little bit of randomness, but not get the full breadth and scope of like your campaign or adventure could go literally anywhere. And even if you never want to leave it up to chance, if you never want the roll of a die to determine your plot or story, these tables make a great reference. I know far too many dungeon masters that just skip past them. They don't read them at all. And that's a mistake. There's quality information, there's quality options in those tables that might spark something in the back of your mind. Going back to chapter 3 for the Creating Adventures section in the DMG, there's an entry that talks about at the end of the adventure, at a climactic moment, that a much more powerful creature than the party enters the scene and kills the main villain of that adventure, and then turns their attention to the party. That's cool. That would be a great way to end a session. It would be a lot of fun, really engaging. And if you hadn't glanced at that table to say, hey, maybe there's a good idea in here, you would have just had the party fight the main villain, like they have so many times before, instead of a really cool twist. And you could even tweak it a little bit and say, they come in, kill the main villain, give a stern warning to the party, and then they leave, leaving the minions behind for the party to clean up. But you can do some really cool things by tweaking the things on the random rollable tables, even if you're not rolling on them. Now let's talk about some of the inherent issues with the random rollable table model, especially when it comes to random encounters. I know I referenced them early in the video, and I did want to address them here because I have been burned by random encounter tables before. I've had near TPKs because I rolled a random encounter that wasn't balanced for the party. And I wasn't as clever enough of a DM that I should be rolling on those tables because they're not one size fits all. There's an assumption that you're going to tweak the encounter based on your party's composition, how powerful your party is. And you can't just roll on a random encounter table and expect it to be one size fits all. And I think that's where especially random encounter tables get a bad rap is once again, like we're talking about with using these tables as a reference point, you should tweak things. You should make them fit your game. And so, if, for example, your party is going through the jungle and you roll that two wereboars come attack, and you know that perhaps your party would be outclassed by two wereboars, perhaps that would be too much. Maybe tweak it a bit. Maybe have it be a wereboar and a real boar as a animal companion or something like that. Tweak it because I think that is the common misconception with random rollable tables is if you decide to use them, they're set in stone. I use them that way because I feel like it drives my creativity. It forces me to think outside of my normal conceptions of either how I tell stories or how the lore of the world is constructed, like with the Umbergen Drow and Breelish example that I gave earlier. And I enjoy that challenge. I enjoy looking at disparate things and saying, how can I make this work? It might be ridiculous and it might just be a thought exercise at the end of the day. I'm like, okay, I made it work, but just barely. I'm not going to put this on a table anytime soon. But other times you have a piece fall into the right place and you go, this is really interesting. This is really engaging. And it could just be little details that you find on a random rollable table that's like, okay, I'm creating a villain. I'm going to go to the criminal background in the player's handbook. And I'm going to roll on those tables. And that's going to be my villain's motivations. Because the party may never figure them out. They might kill the villain on sight. But if the party decides to talk to them, you have a really cool template to roleplay from. So yeah, find interesting and unique ways to use the random rollable tables. And I think you'll see their value. Even if you've sworn them off before, give them a chance, roll some dice, and let your creativity take over. I think that's a good way to tell stories. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to like the video down below if you enjoyed it, and please subscribe to the channel. It does help out a whole heck of a lot. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Eric, and I will see you next time.